Year 326. An empress travels through Jerusalem, searching for nails that pierce the Savior's flesh. 13th century. Crowds travel for weeks to see a piece of wood, proclaimed as the true cross. 1944. An obsessed dictator orders the search for the spear that killed Christ, believing it will grant him absolute power. Relics. Silent objects, heavy with history, mute witnesses of faith and of deception. Fragments of bone, pieces of wood, cloths stained with blood. Some venerate them as bridges to heaven. Others call them elaborate frauds designed to buy souls. For centuries, they have divided empires. They have been the cause of wars, pilgrimages, plunder. What power do these fragments hold? Are they sacred relics or remnants of a great lie? Today we embark on a journey through time and faith to ask ourselves together, how far does the mystery go? And where does the truth begin? But beyond the ancient legends and the relics sealed in glass, there's a question that remains alive today. A question that makes both the faithful and skeptics uncomfortable. Because we're not just talking about dust and bones. We're talking about beliefs, about hope, about business, about power. That's why, so before we travel to the past, let's look at the present. Let's ask ourselves together, are relics a bridge of faith or a leftover of superstition? Current debate, faith or superstition. In the 21st century, relics continue to divide opinions. For millions of believers, they're sacred traces, fragments of heaven fallen to earth, a drop of blood in a reliquary, a splinter of the true cross on a gilded altar, a cloth scorched by time, but marked with the imprint of a crucified man. They are symbols of the incarnation, proof that the divine became matter. To touch them, for many, is to touch faith itself. But others look at them with suspicion. They call them relics of superstition. They say they're medieval artifacts created to control the masses, to attract pilgrims and fill coffers, to give legitimacy to kings, popes, and emperors. And this tension isn't new. 1545. Council of Trent. The Catholic Church decides to confront the Protestant tide, which denounced relics as idolatry, as a blasphemous business. The council didn't abolish them. It regulated them, demanded authenticity. But even today, supposed fragments of the true cross are sold in antique shops. Some dioceses have removed relics for being fakes. The church has tightened regulations. It demands certificates, investigations. Even so, faith doesn't always follow the scientific method. How can you prove a nail pierced Christ's flesh? How do you authenticate an apostle's bone found in anonymous catacombs? For many, the problem isn't in the proof, it's in the human heart, because venerating relics is also clinging to hope, to the idea that the divine left traces here. It's the eternal tension between the visible and the invisible, between faith and reason, between the need to believe and the fear of being deceived. Today, in a world of scanners and carbon-14, many dismiss these relics as superstition. Yet still, millions kneel before them, touching them, praying to them. And so, the question doesn't die. Are they remnants of a fraud, or fragments of a miracle? Faith or superstition? That's what we're going to explore. But to understand it, it's not enough to stay here. We have to travel to the past, discover how it all began, how these relics were born, and how they shaped the history of the world. Come with me. Let's go back in time. To a world where these relics weren't just sacred objects, but the driving force of pilgrimages, of art, and of power, history and culture. Origin, pilgrimages, art. Relics are born with Christianity itself. In a time when the first believers were persecuted, the remains of martyrs were kept in secret. In damp catacombs beneath Rome, names and bones were inscribed on the walls. When Constantine legalized the faith in the 4th century, veneration became public, year 326. Helena, the emperor's mother, travels to Jerusalem. She searches and claims to have found the true cross. She sends fragments to Constantinople, Rome, and beyond. Thus was born a fervor that would mark centuries. Pilgrims from all over Europe walked for weeks, even months. They crossed mountain ranges, traversed deserts, all to see a bone, a splinter, a shroud. Because in them they saw proof of the miracle. Touching the relic was brushing heaven itself. In the 11th century, the expansion of Christianity created competition among churches. A reliquary with a sacred fragment didn't just attract the faithful, it attracted wealth. Cities flourished thanks to their relics. Santiago de Compostela, Rome, Jerusalem, each one offering indulgences and promises of forgiveness. Architecture transformed to display them. Tall, stained glass windows, lofty vaults. Gothic cathedrals were built to house relics, repositories of faith and of treasures. Famous relics traveled across the continent, some protected by armed knights, others stolen, resold. During the Crusades, Eastern relics were looted, taken to churches in France, Germany, Italy, legitimate or fabricated. Because where there was faith, there was opportunity. For the artisan crafting reliquaries of solid gold, for the bishop selling indulgences, for the feudal lord charging tolls to pilgrims, the trade in relics became an industry, to the point that the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 forbade selling them. But the roots were already drawn. The medieval pilgrim didn't travel solely in search of faith. He traveled to admire art, to hear legends, to live the sacred experience. It was a physical journey, and a spiritual one, because the body reached an altar, but the soul sought to touch the eternal. But not everything was light and devotion. In the shadows, secrets, frauds, and mysteries grew that remain unsolved even today. Come with me to uncover the most controversial relics, the ones that awaken faith and doubts, science and legend. Because if the history of relics is written in golden letters, it also has pages stained with doubt. For every venerated relic, there is an unanswered question. For every believer who kneels, there is a skeptic demanding proof. Mystery and enigma. Many relics were born shrouded in legend. Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, claimed to have found the true cross in the 4th century. But even in her time, some asked, how can you prove that wood came from Golgotha? In the Middle Ages, this question became even more pressing. Monasteries and cathedrals claimed to possess fragments of the cross, but there were so many pieces scattered across Europe that a famous 16th century critic quipped, with all these splinters, we could build an entire fleet. And there were even stranger relics, Virgin Mary's milk, feathers from the Archangel Gabriel, hairs of John the Baptist. The trade in relics generated fortunes, and where there was faith, there was a black market. Medieval forgers aged wood, faked parchments. Less scrupulous friars sold holy bones. That turned out to be from animals. It was this trade that forced the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 to ban the sale of relics. But the temptation remained alive. Today, science tries to solve those mysteries. Radiocarbon dating, chemical analyses, comparative studies. The most famous example, the Shroud of Turin, supposed burial cloth of Jesus with the ghostly imprint of a crucified man. 20th century researchers applied carbon-14 dating. The result? 13th or 14th century. Fraud, some declared, but the enigma persists. Defenders argue contamination from fires, medieval repairs. There are imaging experts who still can't explain how the imprint was formed. It remains an open puzzle. Other relics are surrounded by darker legends. The spear of destiny, the supposed lance that pierced Christ's side. Several versions exist. One is displayed in Vienna, another in the Vatican. Legend says whoever possesses it will have absolute power. Hitler coveted it. He ordered it studied. When Vienna fell in 1945, the SS tried to evacuate it. simple superstition or primal fear of sacred power? The Holy Grail, the cup of the Last Supper, has fired imaginations for centuries. Entire crusades were justified in seeking it. Today, dozens of churches in Europe claim to have it, each with its own version of the legend. The Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain bears bloodstains that some say match the Shroud of Turin, but it lacks an image, proof of authenticity, or just another chapter in a saga of disconnected fragments. That's precisely the mystery of relics. Proof alone isn't enough, because the real value isn't just in the object, but in what people believe about it. And where faith demands miracles, there will always be someone to provide relics, true or false. The line between fraud and devotion has never been clear, and perhaps it never will be. At the crossroads of history and legend, of faith and doubt, there's something neither science nor skepticism can erase: the human trace, the deep yearning to touch the sacred. Faith and devotion, the spiritual dimension. For millions of believers, relics are neither a business nor a deception. They are fragments of embodied faith, remnants of sacrifice, witnesses of martyrdom, tangible traces that God became flesh. In a cold and skeptical world, these objects still light candles, bring knees to the ground, draw prayers from the heart, because beyond the gold and splinters, there's an inner certainty. He was here. Many devotees speak of miracles, sudden healings before relics, transformative dreams, callings inspired by touching a cloak, a bone, a cross. For them, there is no doubt. It doesn't matter what carbon-14 says, because faith isn't measured in laboratories. The relic becomes a channel, a bridge between the visible and the invisible. What drives a mother to bring her sick child to a reliquary? What makes an old man travel thousands of kilometers to pray before a piece of wood? Hope, faith, the universal desire to feel that heaven is here among us. And though commerce, fraud, and politics have stained its history, devotion remains. Because for the believer, it's not just the object, it's the mystery it evokes, the sacrifice it records. It is a humble act, accepting that we need symbols, that our faith, so great, needs to touch something small in order to believe. Perhaps that is why relics have never disappeared, because as long as there are humans searching for God, there will always be something to remind us that He, too, walked here. But that pure faith does not live in a vacuum. Throughout history, others saw the power behind that devotion, and they used it to conquer kingdoms, to legitimize empires, to build their own glory. Come with me to discover how relics also became weapons of power. Power and politics, instrument of influence. Throughout history, relics were not just symbols of faith. They were banners of conquest, certificates of legitimacy. In the Middle Ages, possessing a famous relic meant attracting pilgrims, and with them, offerings, taxes, wealth. Cities competed for prestige. They built imposing cathedrals to house a fragment of bone or a piece of wood. Santiago de Compostela flourished as a center of pilgrimage thanks to relics attributed to the apostle. Rome consolidated its power by gathering relics of martyrs. Jerusalem became a strategic target, not only for faith, but for the spiritual treasure its relics represented. The Crusades were officially holy wars to reclaim the Holy Land, but they also sought relics. After the sack of Constantinople in 1204, priceless relics were stolen and sent to Europe. Golden reliquaries, fragments of the true cross, bones of saints. Popes and kings used these sacred treasures as propaganda. God is with us. A lance in Vienna was proclaimed to be the one that pierced Christ's side, the spear of destiny, an object of imperial obsession. Emperors of the Holy Roman Empire were crowned holding it. It was said that whoever possessed it could not be defeated. Centuries later, Adolf Hitler sought it fervently. He believed it would grant him absolute power. Relics also legitimized ecclesiastical power. The Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563, responded to the Protestant Reformation not only with theology, but with art and relics. It displayed the spiritual wealth of the Church as proof of its legitimacy. But this power came at a price. The trade and forgery of relics spread. Bishops and merchants enriched themselves selling dubious fragments. The Fourth Lateran Council, 1215, tried to curb the trade by prohibiting it. But the business was too lucrative, because in the end, relics were more than sacred objects. They were instruments of faith and of power. A power capable of uniting peoples, inspiring crusades, suppressing heresies. A power that shaped kingdoms and defined the history of Christendom. Was this true faith, or a sophisticated game of power? Sacred devotion, or manipulation? These are questions that still resonate today. But beyond power and politics, there is another legacy these relics left behind. A legacy of paths traced across continents. Roots that for centuries guided millions of souls in search of forgiveness, hope, and contact with the divine. Come with me to travel the Pilgrim's route. Pilgrim's route, map, and religious tourism. Imagine a map of Europe covered in lines, paths marked by the dust of bare feet, trails opened by generations of pilgrims, all in search of something sacred. Because relics didn't remain static in golden reliquaries. They became destinations, spiritual centers that gave meaning to epic journeys. Santiago de Compostela, in Galicia, Spain, where the remains of the Apostle James are believed to rest. Since the 9th century, thousands of pilgrims have walked the Camino. Centuries ago, those journeys were penance, promise, or plea for forgiveness. Today, they're still alive. Modern travelers with backpacks and walking sticks, following yellow arrows, united by the same search. Rome, center of Christendom. Relics of apostles, martyrs, and saints. St. Peter himself, considered the first pope, buried beneath the basilica that bears his name. Rome drew and still draws the faithful from every corner of the world. Jerusalem, where the story began. The Holy Land, the Holy Sepulchre, the Via Dolorosa. Pilgrimage there meant risking life on bandit-infested roads or crossing enemy territories. But for the devout, every step was worth it. Constantinople, the new Rome of the East, guarded for centuries some of the most venerated relics, until they fell into the hands of looters in 1204. Relics that then traveled to Venice, Paris, Cologne. Medieval Europe filled with roots, the French way, the Via Francigena to Rome, the Germanic and Slavic routes. Hospices, hospitals, bridges, markets all flourished along the pilgrim's path. Because a pilgrim brought coins, but also faith, and the journey itself was a rite. Sleeping under stars, listening to stories by the fire, sharing prayers in different tongues. It was an act of humility, admitting sin, asking forgiveness, trusting the hospitality of strangers, and above all, reaching the sacred place, touching it, praying, crying, because there, in a fragment of bone or wood, heaven felt closer. Today, centuries later, those roots are still alive, not just as tourism, but as an inner journey. Modern walkers rediscover what thousands of ancestors sought: meaning, faith, hope. Relics did more than generate power. They created spiritual maps, roots that united peoples and cultures, traces on the earth, and marks on the human heart. But even after traveling those paths, the question remains alive. What really are these relics? Fragments of a miracle, or witnesses to a great deception? Come with me to the end of this journey, to reflect together on the power and mystery they still hold. Even after walking those ancient routes, after touching golden altars and relics sealed in glass, the question remains, whispering in the shadows. What truly are these relics? Sacred testimonies of a miracle, or remnants of a carefully constructed fraud? Fragments of faith, or chains of superstition? Divine artifacts, or instruments of earthly power? Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine it. a medieval pilgrim exhausted on his knees before a blackened bone. Tears streaming down his dirty face, promises whispered to a piece of wood, fervent faith in a world without certainties. Now open your eyes and look at yourself. Have we really changed that much? We still look for signs. We still need to touch the sacred. We still want to believe that something greater than us left traces here. Perhaps the most powerful relic isn't the one behind glass, but the one we carry inside. The endless desire to transcend, to connect, to be forgiven, to find meaning in the chaos. But what about you? Do you believe in relics? Do you believe in the miracle? Or in the deception? I invite you to leave your answer in the comments. Tell us your opinion. Share your experience. Debate with us. And if you want to keep exploring these mysteries together, subscribe. Hit the bell so you don't miss any chapter of this journey into the depths of faith, history, and mystery. Because here, we don't give easy answers. We only open doors, and you decide if you dare to cross them. This is Código Divino. Welcome to the hidden side of faith.